One thing that predisposes parents to have securely attached children and to have good relationships is a thing called a coherent autonomous autobiographical narrative. A coherent autonomous autobiographical narrative. Now, what does that mean? According to Dan Siegel, that means it's a life that makes sense, where we feel like our past makes sense according to our present and that we're directing ourselves into a good direction into the future. Coherent, autonomous, autobiographical narrative. And if you think about your life, you'll go, I don't just have one autobiographical narrative. I have a narrative about me as a grade schooler. I have a narrative about me as an infant. I have a narrative about me as a teenager. I have a narrative about me as a lover. I have a narrative about me as a teacher. I have a narrative about me as a friend. I have a narrative about, and so on and so on and so on, through different stages of my life. These are all stories that fit together into an autobiographical narrative. Now remember, all these narratives, all these autobiographical narratives we have, if we allow them to be connected, this is another complex system. These are differentiated parts. If we connect them with acceptance, what do? They naturally integrate towards harmony. And what characterizes a harmony of our autobiographical narratives? What characterizes harmony of our autobiographical narratives is a life that makes sense, where we feel a sense of pleasure, really, of our life, and a sense of ourselves being fully engaged, directing ourselves into the future that we want. Now, what this characterizes is our own myth. This is where myth comes from. What characterizes a mythological figure? It's a great book called Lord of Light, written by Roger Zelazny, where he thought deeply about this and interestingly studied consciousness and studied Indian cosmology, and they wrote a science fiction book. When I was a kid, I just kept discovering these gems, and I didn't realize afterwards that he must have studied Clare Graves. He must have studied Indian cosmology, because it came out and I found it later. And one thing that he said is that when you become purely an expression of spirit, you have now become the hero in your personal myth. And you know that none of us, because human consciousness has such an infinity of variations, nobody becomes the same person. 6.5 billion mythological figures, 6.5 billion life stories, each one amazingly intricate, full of drama. And each one has the capacity, if they fully allow themselves to be an expression of spirit, could rise up through developmental levels until finally they're serving the world as an expression of God. And that's what we as therapists support. And isn't that the coolest job in the world? We're supporting people integrating towards God. And what do people do when they integrate towards God? They want to love the world. They want to love people. They want to take care of themselves, because I'm a person. And if there's something in me I'm ashamed of, I want to love that and connect to that. And, I'm not so ashamed of it anymore. Wow. Wow, that's interesting. You ever notice that when someone says, so how do you do? They go, I'm an alcoholic. I've been in recovery 10 years. I don't know about you, but my first reaction is admiration. Wow, you've been in recovery for 10 years? Now, say they're 50. Okay, up to 40. Alcoholism causes horrible things to people and families, everything. And so they're telling me that they did a lot of bad things to themselves and to other people. But I'm admiring them. Why? They integrated. They chose love and health. And we find that beautiful. One of the greatest things about the Catholic Church, and I know I was becoming integral when I started finding great things about the Catholic Church, because, all that stuff, is the concept of redemption. There was this concept that was put into a conformist culture over 1,500 years that if at some point in your life you surrender to be an instrument of God's will, you are welcomed into the community of righteousness. Wow. And if someone in a heartfelt way says, yes, I did bad, I want to do good now, all of a sudden we feel differently about them. not only that, inside they feel differently about themselves. Their autobiographical narrative now becomes as good as it gets in this physical incarnation. Maybe it gets better than that. I don't know. I don't think so. When people, A.H. Almaas wrote a book called The Inner Journey Home. He's the best writer of spirituality that you'll find, but it's very, very dense. I've been reading it like 1 or 2 pages a day for the last 2 years. I'm on page 435 now. And so I made it to there's 2 journeys. There's the journey of ascent and the journey of descent. The journey of ascent is that you go through different levels of awareness until finally you can stably feel connected with pure emptiness all the time. The absolute, out of which everything's always arising. And he said people develop a stable sense of being connected to emptiness, and they hang out there for a while. He said sometimes years. But at a certain point, you start realizing that out of that comes manifestation. Out of that comes presence. And then out of your body, your life, and so on. And as that comes, what happens? People want to come back and serve. It's the physical manifestation of the bodhisattva vow. But I don't like to make promises. I just do what I'm motivated to do. And I don't have a bodhisattva vow, but for me, it feels right for me to give. And maybe it won't the rest of my life, but it does now. And I like that. I like I'm surrendering to that part of the Keith myth. So, okay, I'll write books and I'll give. All right. Why? Because that's just the best way to be right now. And so at any level, say you're red, say you're egocentric. Okay, what's the healthiest way for you to be all about you? Yeah, I'll help you do that. Fine. Say you're a fundamentalist. I love working with fundamentalist Christians who are motivated to change because they say, all right, what would Jesus do? That works for me. Capitalist, sure. Healthy, it's fine. It's all beautiful. Just fill it up. What's the purest expression of that? Because I know what'll happen. If you fill up a worldview, what happens? You press against the edge, and you know what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to go a step farther, and then a step farther. And we're all supporting what Don Beck calls, we're supporting the spiral. That's the evolutionary trait. Remember, self-transcendence is a temperamental trait in all of us to some extent. This is how we're supporting the universe integrating up to God. Waking up, one of the things that I suggest is that in therapy, you do these things almost all the time. You relate, which is attuning. You teach. Because, when somebody is available, you teach them what you have. You inspire people to reach for further. You confront with truth. You interpret, help people have better explanations. And you direct, you tell them what you think is best in their highest interest. And inspiring is an important part of that.